Good evening. My name is Vicki Levine and I am the director of the Holland Museum, and we're delighted to have all of you joining us tonight. Tonight's program is part of the Holland Museum's Cultural Lens series, and this series is sponsored by Spectrum Health Zealand Hospital and Warner Norcross and Judd. And tonight's program celebrates National Native American Heritage Month, a history of an Anishinabe family, the Whitepigeons of Holland. So just a little bit of housekeeping. We have quite a few people that are joining us this evening, so I'm going to ask all of you to stay on mute, and I will try to mute you if you forget that rule, because it'll make it much easier for everybody else to enjoy the program. If you have questions, and questions may come up during the course of the program, feel free to put those in the chat box at the bottom of your screen. It's a little green box. And that way you don't have to try to remember it for later, and we will make sure that we address that at the Q&A at the end of the program. And one of the things that I wanted to share with you is that we do send out a survey after these programs, and they're really important to us at the museum to really figure out what we are doing right and what we might be not doing right. So please take a few minutes, that's all it takes, to fill out the survey when you get it and return it. One of the things we do ask you to share too is if there are some other topics that you would like us to share during the course of our programming, especially in these virtual days. We'd appreciate that feedback. So please do that.
Or your mom, tell them to come up here. Come on.
So the current exhibit that's happening at the Holland Museum right now, one of our temporary exhibits, is called Election Reflection, Memorabilia from Holland, Michigan. It runs through February 22nd, and it's a really wonderful exhibit of things that people of the community have collected over the years in some of our state and some of our national elections. Nothing to do with the most recent election, but things from years gone by. And it's items that people put in their own collections, some of which they donated to the museum, some of which they put on loan for this exhibit. And the lobby gallery also has an exhibition on voter suppression, which is a service learning project by Holland High School Upward Bound students. So please come to the museum and check out both of those, as well as the other galleries at the museum. The museum is open, I'm happy to say, but we are continuing these programs. We have two programs coming up in December that are part of the Cultural Lens series. We have one December 3rd, which is on gender diversity outside the binary. What does the TIQA and plus mean in the LGBTQIA plus community? And then on December 10th, a panel discussion called Doing the Work, Authentic Allyship. What does an effective allyship mean to members of different marginalized communities? We will have additional programs next year, including in January, on January 18th, to celebrate Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday. We're looking at virtual programming as well as in person if we're able to do that. And more information on that, as well as other programs next year, will be on our website soon. So do check those out. And as I said, we are open. The museum has been open since July. We are open Monday, Fridays, and Saturdays from 10 to 5. We are open Friday and Saturday of this week if you want to do some holiday shopping. We have a lot of fun things in the gift shop to explore. And we are always open on the second Monday of the month in the evening from 4 to 7 for free. And next second Monday is December 14th. And as I said, 4 to 7 o'clock, there's no admission charge. So we offer these programs, these virtual programs we've been doing at no cost. We offer the museum for free those second Mondays because we really want to try to be as accessible as possible for all members of the community. But they do come at a cost, these programs, and certainly being open does come at a cost. So if you have the capacity and you are moved by what we're doing in any way, please consider a donation to the museum. We are all struggling some pretty difficult times right now with the pandemic, and it's affecting our revenue streams. So if this makes you feel like it's something that's worthwhile to spend your time, and you can, please consider a donation. You can do it online, you can mail a check or stop in the museum with a gift, and we'd appreciate that. So now I get to introduce our speaker, Elizabeth Chivis. She is from the Eagle Clan of the Potawatomi and Chippewa nations and a citizen of the Saginaw Chippewa Indian tribe of Michigan. She is head woman for her White Pigeon family and was raised within the traditional community and culture of Native Americans in the Great Lakes. She has a formal education studying education, business, and political science. She was the cultural leader for the Saginaw Chippewa Tribal School for 7 years and developed the cultural curriculum and annual cultural activities for over 300 students. Currently, she serves as the executive board treasurer for her congregation of, excuse me, of the Midday Wawin Midday Widjig. Please welcome Elizabeth Chivis. Elizabeth, I'm going to stop sharing and allow you to take over.
Thank you. Thank you, Vicki. Real quick, can everyone hear me? Great. Bonjour, Kajuwakim Indigenous, Magizia Dodam, Potawatomi Ojibwe and Dow. What I just said was bonjour, hello. My spirit name is Warm Rain. I'm Eagle Clan, and I am of the Potawatomi and Chippewa nations. In our language, we say Bodwewadmi and Ojibwe. Today, I am very thankful to be invited to share some of my family's history. We were, for many, many generations, born and raised in Holland, watched our beautiful city grow into the community it is today. Through my presentation, I'll be sharing some of our history, where I come from, and pretty much focusing on the time that we were here as we lived in Michigan, Holland, Michigan. So we'll start with, and you'll have to excuse me, this is my first Zoom presentation, so not being as techy as I thought I was, I will do the best I can with going through my presentation program. Okay, so first we're going to talk about the 1824 and 1868. This was Potawatomi Indian removal. This is an era that our Indian nations here, especially the Potawatomi, we were forcibly removed off of our land. We resided in Michigan and Southwest Michigan for many generations, and as the different removal acts happened, it wasn't just one time where they gathered us all up and they shipped us off out west. There was different periods and different actual times that the native people were gathered up and forcibly removed off of their property, off of their land. So I'm going to start with discussing my 7th great grandfather, Ohimawa Mimi, or Chief Wab Mimi. He has, we have a town, Whitepigeon, Michigan, named after my 7th great grandfather. And this would have been in the 1830s, early 1830s, that my 7th great grandfather sacrificed his life to save his community as friends in the Whitepigeon area. And that prairie area, we had survived and were living well amongst all of the settlers, and it was a good time period up until the 1830 when there was war and there was a lot of opportunity to remove Native people off of our property. So Ohimawa Mimi, he sacrificed his life to save his community. And going through my presentation, my program, you'll notice that we have a lot of veterans in our family. It has been ongoing with Whitepigeon family that we have served, different individuals through different generations have served in the military. So going into 1909, now this is where my story begins with when the Whitepigeon family moved to Holland. After 1909, August 10, that date was very important because in this picture, you'll see right here, this little boy standing next to Wamimi Monument. And this was the dedication ceremony. There was, the articles say 4,000 plus people attended this monument ceremony. And so I have my great-great-grandpa Bill here, my great-grandpa, excuse me, Bill Whitepigeon, or William Pigeon. He was son of John Pigeon and Mary Medewis. And here's a closer picture of him standing next to the monument, and he had his regalia on, representing our family very well. It was really important to remember the removal period. After the removal period, we go into what we call the Indian boarding school period. And through 1860 to 1978, we actually had Native students, Native children that were forcibly removed from their home to be educated in the boarding school. And we also had voluntary attendees. And here we have my grandma. This is my great-grandma Clara, and she's holding one of her children. I do believe this is my father as a baby. Nope, it's my Aunt Mabel, I'm sorry. And then here we have another picture of my grandma Clara and my grandpa Bill. These are my great-grandparents. The Indian boarding school, that time era was important to remember, and I'll be reflecting back on it through other slides. But my grandpa Bill, my great-grandpa Bill and great-grandma Clara, they sent their daughter Mabel to the boarding school. Now in 1924, my uncle, my great-uncle Calvin Whitepigeon, Calvin Pigeon, he was born to William Pigeon and Clara Rosette. And this picture here is a picture of the church camp meeting. Back in 1924, it was still in a lot of areas illegal for large groups of Native people to get together, even if amongst the same family members. There was town ordinances and things that any large groups of Native people, we were not allowed to gather together. So we had the shelter of the Christian church to be able to come together for church camp meetings. And that was an opportunity for the extended family, all the great cousins and everyone to get together for church camp. And that is still ongoing. We have different reservations have their church camps. Now, another important part of 1924 is the Native Americans' right to vote. Prior to this, 1924, we did not have the right to vote. So even though we were a part of the United States, we were here, we were denied the right to vote until 1924. And this is a picture of my great-grandma, Clara, and my great-grandma, great-great-grandma, Kate, that her mother. Now moving into the 1930s, Indian Reorganization Act. Now this is a time period where the United States government allowed Native communities to, under the IRA, be organized and reestablished as a tribal band. And the tribe I belong to, the Saginaw Chippewa tribe, shortly after the IRA gained their recognition and became a tribe. This is a group shot. This is my great-grandpa Bill. This is my great-uncle Calvin, his eldest, my great-grandma Clara, and a bunch of Shagnabie cousins and others that we're having a nice celebration at my grandparents' house there. I do believe this picture, I could be wrong, but I do believe this picture was taken at the Burke Avenue house. I do believe Burke Avenue doesn't exist in Holland anymore, but back then it was the spot to be as far as the Whitepigeon family. And then we're moving into the time period where my great-grandpa Bill, we all are familiar in Holland with the Heinz Pickle Factory. And well, with the Heinz Pickle Factory came great employment. And so my grandpa Bill worked there for many, many years. Part of his stint during the Heinz Pickle Factory, while he was an employee there, the town of Holland was very undeveloped at the time, but industry was moving back to the area, and the Heinz pickle factory was a huge employer, and people were moving to Holland to come work. And so there was a large portion of Hispanic community that my grandfather, Bill, helped. My father told me stories about how during his childhood, he could remember going over to Grandpa and Grandma Clara and Bill's house and having many people there, all who worked with Grandpa. And Grandma Clara always had soup on. She always had bread making. She and my grandpa, they helped feed and shelter employees of the pickle factory as they're moving into town. So we had many fathers who would come here, start work, get on their own 2 feet, and then move their families to the community. So he was a big part of the community here in the 1930s, 40s, and into the 50s. Now we're going to be going into the World War II, and my Uncle Calvin, my great uncle, and you see him here in his uniform. This is before he was getting ready to ship out. And my grandpa Bill, great grandpa, Grandma Clara. This right here is my grandpa, Edward. And then I have my great aunt Mabel, and she moved to Traverse City area after she got married and started her family. And then this is my great uncle Howie. He was the youngest. And here's another picture of Grandpa and Grandma, Clara and Bill. And here again, the times were rough. Everything was in the development stages, but most of the pictures I see going back through developing this program, everyone's smiling. So even though they were hard times because of the era, it still was community. They really valued the community here. And so my great uncle Calvin, he went to World War II, stormed the beaches of Normandy. He made it home. And in 1944, he was decorated. And we got him to come home safe to us. And this is a picture of my great uncle when he was in his elder years. And back in 1994, this Holland Sentinel did an article about him. So I shared my clipping of that article. And it just gives an example, and it talks about what he had to do over there and how it affected him. And it was a wonderful experience because this was the first time that our family really heard him open up about his experiences during World War II. And I have to say too, if you don't notice, that my great uncle is one of my favorite people. He had the opportunity of taking me to my first movie. And the movie was Bambi. And being that he was a World War II veteran, he had the delight of sharing and explaining to me death. The first time I was 3 years old after watching Bambi, and I think we all know what happens to Bambi's mother. And so my uncle was able to explain in such a gentle and beautiful way death. And so he really, growing up, was one of those figures that he was a gentle, kind man. He could see the beauty in the crack of a sidewalk because there's a beautiful plant growing from it. And he would identify that and smile all the time. So it's my Uncle Calvin, very big influence in my life. And then we're going into 1932. My grandma Virginia E. Graverette, Elizabeth is her middle name. That's who I'm named after. And so Virginia Graverette was 2 years old when her parents died of tuberculosis. She went into a foster home, work home for 6 to 9 months roughly. And then from there, she was transferred to the Mount Pleasant boarding school to be then transferred to Flandreau Indian School. And this was a time period that my grandmother was in the boarding school and going through that experience of, for one, she was so young, she didn't remember her family. She hardly knew where she came from. And at the Flandreau Indian School is where she was able to connect with my great aunt Mabel and my great aunt Goldie And still today, the friendships that she developed in boarding school, she still held strong. My Auntie Goldie, even if we're not blood relatives, the relationship and the sistership, really the sisterhood that was developed between my grandma Virginia and some of those ladies in the boarding school was very strong. It was family. At age 13, 14, she was hospitalized with tuberculosis. And through that time period and hospitalization, she was there until she was 19. She did survive. She is actually in the medical books, taking the experimental medication to cure tuberculosis. And it was successful, thank goodness, or I wouldn't be here. Now we move into 1949. This is when Edward Pigeon, the son of William and Clara Pigeon, married Virginia Elizabeth Graverette. And this is a wedding picture of my grandpa Ed and my grandma Virginia, and then some of the cousins. And then we have a picture of another group shot that's got my grandma Virginia and my grandma Clara and grandpa Bill. A closer shot of them there. The boarding school was a huge impact on the family. One thing when you're dealing with boarding school is that the effects of the industrial school was creating that different style of parenting, institutionalized parenting. And so one thing that they lacked, that the boarding school children did not receive, was nurturing. That was something that they were took care of and they were educated, but the nurturing part, it left something to be desired. Now we're moving into 1950 to 1953, the Korean War. And my grandpa, Edward J. Whitepigeon, he was born September 27, 1929. And he did pass away May 29 of 2006, but he spent a time period in the Korean War. One thing I would say, there is not a lot that I can share of his wartime stories. It was something that he didn't talk a lot about with myself. He did with my father, who's also a veteran. After he got back, him and my grandma, they had my dad. And this is a picture here. My dad is sitting down here. He is about 6 months old. And this is his cousin, a Graverette cousin, which was really nice that once my grandma Virginia left boarding school, she remembered, she left the hospital. She remembered Mabel Pigeon from Holland. She remembered Goldie from Holland. There was the women that she remembered, which was family to my grandpa Edward. Because she remembered that she knew some people in Holland, she got on a bus and from the hospital came to Holland, Michigan to find the Pigeons. And after she found the Pigeons, she fell in love with my grandpa and had my father. So from 1953 through 1970, this is a policy period of American Indian termination and relocation. Now, this is a period of time where instead of having tribes come together and become a band and be recognized as a whole that way, they decided to encourage Native people, Indian people, to move to the urban areas and find employment at the different cities. And so there was this time period where being displaced again. And it really was a period of time where here again, we were moving into the civil rights movement, and we had the League of North American Indian, along with other organizations at the time that were assisting in trying to protect our treaty rights and our sovereign rights as Indian nations. And this is a picture of my grandparents holding my father. This is my grandpa Ed and my dad. This is my grandma Virginia. This is her Graverette family. Now we move in, my grandfather Edward had a very good friend. When they were young men, I had brought up the League of North American Indian, and that was an organization where my grandfather had the opportunity, Ed, working with Shupshiwana, Eagle Clan Weekon, Howard Laharu. Now, Howard, I call him Shupshi. He's like a grandfather to me. And as their relationship developed, also was the importance of education, and also important to participate in the development of policies and the opportunities for Native American people in our Southwest Michigan area into Holland. And so Shupshi, he was degreed in archaeology through Mexico, and my Spanish is very bad, so I'm not able to speak the rest of the title there, but and he got an honorary degree in biology from Spain. He also was very knowledgeable from the time he was 3 years old. He was raised with the cultural and historical knowledge, the religious knowledge of our ancestors by his grandfather. And that in our culture, and that's a very strong thing that it still is continued today, the passing of information from grandfather or grandparent to grandchild is so integral into all parts of our Anishinaabe people, our life. And he was the Manitowilna of the Midewin-Midewidjig. He's an elder, 4th degree Midewin, and an accomplished author. He wrote several children books, and he also wrote some very good informational books for our congregation of the Widjig. Here's another picture of him in his university days as a young man. And then here's a picture of his son, Alex, and his wife. Alex is his youngest son, and this is his wife over here. And Shupshi, I really enjoyed this picture because it shows a picture of him in the background in his elder years. One thing about Shupshi, he didn't really care for too many pictures, so it's very hard to find images of him. He was born March 13 of 1927, and he passed March 16 in 1992. In 1949, Jerome Pigeon, son of Edward and Virginia Pigeon. Here is my grandpa Edward. Here is my father, and this is his sister Gail. This is also one of those parts of our history that's a part of a loss to our family. When my Aunt Gail here on my grandpa's lap, when she was 6 months old, we lost her to a house fire, and that was here in Holland. And pictured below is my Aunt Julie, their youngest daughter, and in her beautiful red, this is actually a red velvet dress that my grandmother made her. Now, after starting their family, moving into the Phoenix College, Arizona, my grandparents were dedicated to education. That is one thing that they could not stress hard enough, is the importance of our people utilizing our treaty rights, utilizing our mind, and gaining that education. And at that time, it was really hard for Native American people to go to university here in Michigan. And having the opportunity to go to Phoenix College in Arizona, that gave them the means to learn and to further their ability to write and create. And this is a picture. This is my father here standing. This is I do believe my Aunt Julie here, and this is my Uncle Jeff. My Uncle Jeff, I have a slide to talk about him. He's another veteran of my family. Now, in 1949, also, my mother was born, and Sarah Susan Lawson, daughter of John Lawson and Ruby Saylor. And this is a picture of my grandfather with my mom and my Aunt Carol. This is a picture here of my grandma and my grandpa. My grandma Ruby, she worked, and my grandpa worked in Holland and lived here in Holland for all of their life. And this is a picture of my mother. She's a very big gardener. She loves flowers and planting, having her hands in the earth. It's part of her roots, I think, too. This is a picture of my grandfather, John Lawson, when he was young, right about the time that he was marrying my grandmother, Ruby. And Ruby Saylor, she was quite the beauty. And this is a picture of myself back in the 80s. And with my mother. And it's another picture of my mother and me in our regalia. This was at my wedding. Okay, and one point I wanted to make. Yes, I am Potawatomi on my father's side and Ojibwe, but I also do have some Cherokee blood from my mother's line, and it actually goes back through my grandma Ruby Saylor's line. And her Cherokee bloodline comes from Aaron Brock Sr. They called him Chief Redbird, and he was a Civil War hero. I wanted to mention that because one thing growing up, my mother and my grandparents, they were light complected, blue eyes. And so to look at them, you wouldn't think that they were part Native American. But today, what we got to remember is that despite having brown hair, brown skin, brown eyes, Native American people, we come in all colors. We come in all shapes and sizes. We are a very huge, diverse community. And so my mother and father being born the same year, of course, naturally they meet. And in 1968, my mom and dad, they got married. Jerome Pigeon married Sarah Lawson. And this is a picture of my mom and my dad when they were in, I do believe, high school. And during that time period, they also, I have a picture of them at their prom. I love the hairdo. It really reflects on the time era that they were growing up in. And as you see, smiles and smiles, a beautiful time to be getting married. And then after they were married, this same time period, before they started to have all of us children, my father, Jerome Pigeon, he's a Vietnam War combat veteran. And the Vietnam War started between 1955 and 1975. My father was actually in Vietnam from 1968 through 1969, 8th Company 4th of the 9th 25th Division, Tay Ninh Province. And part of his duties there in Vietnam, he would fly in on the helicopters here, and he would have to jump out. And see the gentleman, they would have to jump out. And he did have to carry several different pieces of equipment for war, the different tools, as you see him carrying a grenade launcher there. This time period was development of character, development of his spiritual power also. I mean, we all, in Indian country, and let me say Indian country defined is all the country that Native American or Indigenous people live. So we have the United States, but in addition to that, we have Canada. There was no border prior to the states being developed. We also have what we call the Jay Treaty. And so that border was, it's an invisible border to us. We call all of our Aboriginal territory Indian country. And so through this time period, being in the war was very difficult. And that time, there was also a lot of things happening back home. And we're going in through the Civil Rights Movement, 1954 through 1968. You know, this was an opportunity that all people of color were trying to bring light and bring recognition to the lack of dignity, the lack of rights, the lack of protections that the people of color had during that time. And this is a group shot of my parents, and this is my grandma. Here again, I love this picture because it shows the time. You can see the style, and so nice group shot of the family and cousins. 1968 then, American Indian movement. And the American Indian movement was also an important time period for us Native people. We had to make a point of pushing our issues to the forefront. We were being denied the same rights and equal protection and the ability to pursue happiness. So we had to have action. And not only were there people in the forefront, on the front line, as we call it, or the spear point, as my father, Jerome, likes to say, you know, you always have to have a spear point with a movement. You have to have people that are willing to put themselves in that front line, but you also have to have people behind the scenes and doing their due diligence and using their education to assist in any way and every way, contacting senators, contacting congressmen, doing these things, and the paperwork involved with bringing attention and awareness to the lack of rights that we had as Native people at the time. And so this is a picture of Dennis Banks and my grandfather, Edward Pigeon. And again, this is, I'm having feedback from someone, just FYI, Ricky. So this, here again, this is a picture behind the scenes and in front of the screen. It took all groups of people in order to accomplish our civil rights movement and our American Indian movement. Okay, I'm unmuted, I do believe. We'll carry on. This is a slide that I have dedicated to my Uncle Jeff, Jeffrey Jean Pigeon Sr. He was an Army veteran, and like I said before, it's a very, very strong connection my family has through their service periods of time. And so my Uncle Jeff, he was born September 30th, 53. He passed in 2012. And this is a picture of him in his military honors. And I have included a picture of him in the young happy days of child rearing. And I do believe this picture is in Holland. I'm not quite sure what lake or river that is. Here again, everything has changed so much over time. Here we have my uncle, Jeff, here in his traditional regalia, and he's wearing a mink cape, and he has a breastplate made of hairpipe bone, and with his breechcloth and ribbon shirt. He's carrying a medicine wheel. This is his daughter, Jennifer Pigeon, and she's a fancy dancer, and you see she's got a breastplate, she's carrying her shawl, and she has mink otter fur wraps in her hair. And here's a picture of myself and Jennifer. I was helping teach my cousin Jenna how to dance. That was one of the things that we always did in our family, was pass on our knowledge to each other and share how to do things and encourage each other to pick up different parts of our culture, a part of our history, utilizing that dancing and going and being at the powwows and the drumming and the singing. Here again, it reaches to the extended family. So it encourages our children to be together. And now we're moving into 1970. 1970, my brother Jerome Pigeon Jr. was born. And through this time period, this is when my parents bought a house on 136th Avenue, just a little, about 3/4 of a mile from what was West Ottawa High School. And this was a time period, though, that we had a neighbor move in next door. We had been living there for a few years. I was about 3 years old at the time. And this was a time period where bullying, we learned, our family learned about what it's like to have bullies live next door. And unfortunately, there was some altercations, several altercations, where as people who come from a long line of veterans, we were encouraged to be passive. We were not encouraged to fight. We were encouraged to talk our way and communicate rather than go to fisticuffs. So this time period for my brother, between 1972 to 1980, those first 10 years, he dealt with bullies in the neighborhood. This here is a picture of my brother Jerome and his wife Leslie. She's in her traditional regalia. This is a fancy dance outfit. She has beaded braid ties, and she's wearing eagle feathers in her hair. And my brother is carrying their marriage blanket. They had a traditional marriage ceremony, and that includes a blanket. In our culture, in our way of marriage, we have a blanket that's wrapped around the couple, and that is signifying that they are married, rather than rings. Of course, we still like having our wedding rings, but that was something that we all still do. And here's a picture of my little brother Adam when he was barely 6 weeks old, my brother Jerome, and myself. Here we have my brother and my dad. This is my dad. They're traditional male dancers. And the traditional style, they carry a bustle. They wear a bustle on their backside. And they have, you see my brother has a shield. And my father has a coup stick, or it's for counting coup. That's a dance stick, or it could be a weapon of war too. But typically we don't carry weapons into the dance arena. Now, 1972 through 1974, this is a time period where my grandpa Edward Pigeon, he left Holland for a short period of time and worked with Arnold Somick at the Saginaw Chippewa Indian tribe of Michigan. And through this time period, the tribe, here again, they were developing their infrastructure, retaining their grants, and establishing new programs. And my grandfather, Edward, he worked, utilizing his education, and worked for the tribe for a few years, helping develop their behavioral health program, helping develop their 7th-generation program, the wood shop, and other areas of public health, and also reestablishing some of the federal grants that was important for the tribe at the time to retain to help their membership. Now, we're going into my page. This is 1974, and this is when I was born. This is a picture of me. I was a very happy, active baby. They said I loved my Johnny jump up. And we have a picture of me in front of the monument. This is a picture of me traditional dancing in my regalia. I'm carrying an eagle feather fan. And this is a picture of me and my mother. And then we have a picture of me and my husband. I'm in a traditional female regalia, and he's in a traditional male regalia. And these are my children. I wanted to include a picture of my 3 children. They're all grown up now, but this is a Calvin. He's a fancy dancer, a fancy bustle. You notice the bustles on his back. It's a war dance. This is my daughter Skylar. She's in a traditional regalia. And this is my daughter Sarah in her fancy dance regalia. Now we move into 1977. This is the year my brother Adam was born. He's a Navy veteran. He spent his time as an air crewman. You see him in his uniform here. And this is the kind of plane that he had to fly on to do his duties. Here is a picture of my father and Adam's son, Edward, who's named after my grandpa Edward. And this is my brother Adam. And this is us doing some mushroom picking. That's Edward. We start our children young when it comes to foraging and gathering. Now, Adam's a firekeeper, pipe carrier, flagstaff carrier. He is a artistry. His artistries include handcrafts, beadwork, plant, herbal medicines. He's a father, a fisherman, a hunter, gatherer, and forager. He is somebody in our family that has retained that knowledge, learning from a baby, and teaching his future generations. This is his son, my nephew Addison, who is in his traditional male regalia. This is examples of beadwork that my brother has made. It's the picture doesn't do it justice. It's peyote stitch. It's very complicated and very, I'm not the best peyote stitcher, so I usually go to Adam. This is a picture of a powwow. And Adam's the little guy here in the front dancing. And then this is a picture of Adam and my father, Jerome, getting ready to conduct ceremonies. And he loved fishing. Now this picture here, I've included this because this fish here that he caught, my brother Adam used to fish the Pine Creek. And back when we were kids, we could walk over there and we could catch fish and actually eat them out of the Pine Creek. He would catch brown trout and other various fish. And now we have 1978 Native American Freedom of Religion Act and the Indian Child Welfare Act, an important time period because prior to this, Native American people, we did not have freedom of religion. We had to be umbrellaed under the Christian church and Christian doctrine. And so it's very important to make note of the 1978 Freedom of Religion Act. It helped us come out of secret with our traditional customs and our heritage. Prior to that, I remember being very little. Here I was 3, and I remember being told, be careful what I talk about because it was a very dangerous time period until we had the 78 Freedom of Religion. Now, the Indian Child Welfare Act was also something that helped end the boarding school era, the children being forcibly removed from their home and putting into boarding schools. Now, this act helped protect Native children and keep them with their families. This is a picture of me when I was 6 in my fancy dance regalia, and this is a picture of my Auntie Julie getting me ready with my first set of beadwork to go dance at the powwow. 1980, Michigan Employment Security Commission. This is when my father worked for the state of Michigan and helped various minority people through the Grand Rapids, Holland area, through West Michigan, to gain good employment, great employment. And so he spent many years, and he retired from MESC. Now moving into 87, this is an article that the Holland Sentinel wrote about my father. Our family, we were going to go to the Soviet Union, and for his artwork, my father, he spent many, many hours and a lot of his time doing watercolor paintings. If you see in the article here, the painting that was actually sent to the museum in Moscow, and you see works behind us. But this is Adam, me, my brother Mark, my mother, my father, and my eldest brother. This is an example of my father's artwork. This is a watercolor he did of me in '83. And this is a watercolor he did of my Uncle Wendy. He's an extended family member, and I call him Uncle even though we're not blood related. We are related because he is my uncle. And that's how it works in Indian country. We don't have to be blood related, but somebody older than you and is your teacher, you call them auntie or uncle. And so now moving into 1987 to 1990, this is Native Americans Grave Protection and Repatriation Act. This time period was a very important time period because prior to this, our Native American graves in our mounds, in our sacred mounds, or in our sacred burial sites, they were being robbed. People were digging up our ancestors' bones and they were putting them into universities and museums to study. And we had to have this Protection and Repatriation Act in order to gain rights to our ancestors' remains, to put them back in Mother Earth respectfully, and our items of cultural patrimony, sacred and ceremonial items. We had to have this act in order to gain back that those things from museums and universities across the nation and internationally. Now, this is a picture of my father in his traditional regalia. And you see he has the Potawatomi flower on his apron. My grandmother is in her traditional female regalia. She's got a high dress that the family made for her. And she's carrying her purple shawl with chinette fringe. And she's carrying her eagle fan that my father made her. And she's wearing her eagle feathers in her hair. This is a picture of my grandpa Edward and my grandma Virginia at a banquet ceremony. Now, 1985 through 1993, I mentioned it was very important for freedom of religion, because prior to that we had to be umbrellaed under a Christian church or a Christian doctrine. Now we have the right to have our religion and practice our religion and share with our children openly. And this is a picture of the rattle, the Mideway community rattle. The beadwork peyote stitch is done by Rose Shalafo and her family. Here again, extended family. And it's made of a turtle shell, and it has otter fur, eagle feathers, and the peyote stitch with the leather fringe. Now, the Mideway Jig was federally and state recognized as an ecclesiastical organization based on the continuation of pre-Columbian Native Algonquian Amerindian religious body and priesthood. The church is incorporated as an ecclesiastical organization on June 25, 1991. The new Mideway Jig practices the traditional religion of Anishinaabe people to promote better spiritual, social, physical health, and well-being, to aid our families and to aid all mankind as well as our earth environment through teaching the ancestral Mideway values and traditions, rites, ceremonies, and survival skills to all who ask. And this was a very important time period, because in order for this to happen, for us to actually have our ecclesiastical status, our organization recognized both federally and statewide, we had to, my grandfather Edward had to talk to and go to Senator Levin to get the process finalized. Back in '85, my dad had an idea. My dad, Jerome, had an idea, and he was sitting there with my grandpa Edward and my Shep Shawana, and discussing, how everybody can have a church on, every corner here in Holland, but how come we can't? What do we need to do to establish that? And this was the process then, and how it was started. And my grandpa Edward, utilizing his education and the people he knew, provided the opportunity, and Senator Levin, through his actions, helped the Widjig become federal and state recognized as an ecclesiastical with the 501(c) status. And this was the letter from Carl Levin letting my grandfather know that he should be hearing from the Internal Revenue Service soon that we were granted our status. And of course, this is a letter that's from my grandfather to Senator Levin, explaining how grateful we are and accomplishing this task for us. And so then in 1993, we were certified as a religion. Now we move into cultural revitalization, extended family, drumming, dancing, and ceremonies, and all the important aspects of the extended family, and having our freedom of religion and having our freedom to share our culture, our value system, our morals with the greater community, with the non-Indian community. It really was the igniting of, in many, many families in our West Michigan area and in Holland, of that extended family, the sharing, the learning through this time period of Jerome and Hilda Surratt, and Gloria and Jerome McCullough. These are individuals that were key in helping my family retain and reestablish our historical rights and our heritage as when it comes to the religious part. And 1994, the Eagle Feather Law defines Native American as an enrolled member of the federally recognized tribal band. It's really important with the organization of controlling and protecting eagle feathers they also defined the definition of Native American. So we had to enroll with a tribe. Prior to that, Native American people, we didn't have to necessarily be an enrolled tribal member. We still had our treaty rights. We were still dealt with the government and had the tuition waiver. We had our rights. But new definition, so everybody had to join a federally recognized tribal band. And here again, with a cultural revitalization and representing Anishinaabe community, it was something that my family, we encouraged all of the members of our family to make their regalia. And a lot of things were made by ourselves or by family members and gifted to us, or extended family members and gifted to us. This is a picture of my father and my grandfather here, my father here in their traditional male regalia. You see they're wearing their eagle feather bustles on their backside. My father here in his traditional regalia, and this is my Aunt Julie in her traditional female regalia. This is a picture of me right here. I'm dancing at the powwow, and this is one of the things I loved most to do. And it was an opportunity to, here again, make new friends, see old friends, meet family members that I didn't even know I was related to. I have a ton of cousins. And so 1992 through 1995, the Potawatomi tribes in lower southwest Michigan gained federal recognition. And so we had the Pokagon Band of Potawatomis, the Gun Lake Band of Potawatomi, and the Nottawassippi Huron Band of Potawatomis gain their federal recognition, and our tribal bands of the Potawatomi. And here you have my father as a veteran. Our veterans are the flag carriers that open up in our ceremonies, our celebration events that we call Jingdamuk or powwow. And here you have Frank Bush, one of my father's teachers, also the elder medicine man pipe carrier who named all of my family pretty much, and my father in his traditional regalia. This is a group picture of me and my family. I'm about 13, 14 years old, and this is just part of us, but it's a good picture to include because I mentioned the extended family, and even after divorce, we're still family. And you see my aunt here and her new husband. This is children of my Uncle Jeff. He's not pictured in here, but this is my Uncle Calvin, my great uncle, who I named my son Calvin after. This is my Grandma Virginia. This is my Grandpa Edward, my dad, my mom, my brother Jerome, and here's Adam, and baby Mark. I'm holding Mark, my youngest brother. Now we have the time period, 1998, where the White Pigeon family moves away from Holland. And the reason why we moved away from Holland was that earlier in 1997, my father, he did a lot of work for the VFW. He had the honor guard, color guard uniform. And so he went to veterans funerals and gave them the 21 gun salute. He carried the flags. He helped fold the flags for the veterans and presenting to their family members. And part of us moving away, my dad, he, one afternoon, he went to a funeral. He did the color guard, honor guard duties. He came home, and the individual that he was at the funeral for was a gentleman that he knew from high school, and they went to Vietnam together. And so it was his passing. And my father came home, and in his full uniform still, he sang the AIM song, the American Indian Movement song. And singing that song alerted our next door neighbor, who thought my father was putting an Indian voodoo curse on his family, and decided to call the police. Well, the police came 4 cars deep. There was 4 cars coming to stop my father from hand drumming. And you see here, this is my father and my brother, and there's the hand drums. So hand drumming and singing the AIM song at 4:30 in the afternoon in his own yard, in his own driveway, in his own home. And my father got a disturbing the peace ticket. And even though it wasn't a costly ticket, it was the purpose, it was the point. 4 police cars had to come and they tried to interrupt my father while he was in ceremony. Even though we have freedom of religion, we still couldn't practice our religion in our own yard here. And so unfortunately, because of those actions, it really pointed out the lack of inclusion that we had in the community at the time. And unfortunately, that led to us moving to the Isabella Reservation area, more towards Mount Pleasant and Shepherd, Michigan. Here's a picture of my father and my daughter. She graduated from University of Michigan with full honors. And this is my son. He graduated from high school, Mount Pleasant High School. And my father here again, our family generations, that was always very important and pushed very hard on us to gain our education, to learn and to continue to read. My father and my nephew, Edward, who's named after my grandpa Edward. And this is just, I wanted to include thank you veterans, because this is a group of gentlemen that my father served in Vietnam with and that are still here. And they get together annually when they can. They're all very elderly now, so, but they come together and talk about old times and good times, and they keep in touch. 1998 was a very important year for me. That was, I had all three of my children, my grown children now, all three of my children were born in Holland, Michigan at the Holland Hospital. And this is a picture of my dad and my Aunt Julie inside the longhouse, getting ready for ceremonies. (1998 through 2004), this was a part in our family history where we had moved back to the Isabella Reservation, and we weren't necessarily living on the, not all of us were on the reservation. My father never lived on the reservation, and he is very proud that he has never been reservated. We were landowners, and that's how my great-grandpa Bill wanted it. He encouraged all of us future generations to be landowners, to go to school and have your education. Now, this is also a time period because we're coming away from our home, our roots, our, you know, Holland, Michigan, where we were all born and raised, and now moving into a new community that is also part of our community, being that we were members of the tribe. It really brings forth family resiliency, you know, the adversity and situations that happen. We choose, through our beliefs, we choose how we're going to handle that. What is the conclusion or consequence that we're going to let ourselves experience emotionally? And, you know, problems happen, adversities happen, situations happen, and it's up to us. And this is how some of our core belief system is. It's up to us and our beliefs to how are we going to respond to that? Are we going to let people hurt our feelings and be angry or be sad or mad, or are we going to choose to have a different conclusion, a different consequence to the situation? And this is where we really honed in those skills, working as a teacher for the academy. It was a Montessori school at the time. It really helped me do my job, knowing that there's going to be adversities that happen, and I have a belief system that I need to have faith in, and the conclusion and consequences to other people's actions, it's up to me, and it's up to the individual and how we're going to respond. And so I've been encouraged to choose to respond in a better way than just to be angry or let the negative emotions affect us. This is a picture of myself and my Aunt Julie in our traditional regalia, Potawatomi blouses and ribbon skirts. This is a picture of my niece Janelle in her traditional regalia. And this is a group picture of my son Calvin, Skylar, and Sarah, my children, and their extended family, the cousins that we met, and their Graverette family. So through my grandma Virginia's line, these are my little cousins. Now, the family presentations going across Michigan, this time period, we did a lot of presentations. We went through different school districts, different universities. We even went as far as the West Virginia to share parts and pieces of our culture and our heritage, and the different craft work, and here again, the philosophies that helped us be resilient and survive through all of these different time periods that we had to survive through. This is a slide that's talking about, this is Lansing, Michigan State Capitol. Idle no more. My father and my brother, they went and they did the hand drumming. This is the picture. Here's my father with the staffs on the steps. And with Native American people, it's really important for us to come together. When we have to protest, we have to come together and protest. The only way we've been able to gain back our rights or reestablish our treaty rights and different things is by coming together and making our voice heard. And so here is an example of how my family's continued to not be idle anymore. The more pictures of the state capitol of the event, and there's numerous events that happened throughout the years of where we do have to come together and protest. Now, this is just a slide talking about my daughters. This is Sarah, my eldest daughter. She was Miss Potawatomi Nation 2005, and this is my daughter Skylar, and they're both in fancy dance regalias on the side here, and this is fancy and this is fancy, and I'm in a traditional regalia. You notice that they're wearing their shawls. This dance represents the lifespan of a butterfly, the story of a butterfly. At another time, I can do another presentation and talk specifically about the dance styles, but I wanted to mention that both of my daughters, they enjoyed the title of Miss Potawatomi. The pageantry, and that's part of the powwows. It's a time for us to showcase our talents. This is my son, Calvin Ballou. He was the last of our descendants who came from my 7th great grandfather, Chief Wabmimi. He was the last one to be born here in Holland, Michigan at the Holland Hospital. You have Calvin here, he's grass dancing in his grass dance regalia. I'm in a jingle dress regalia here, and Calvin's in his grass dance, and then over here he's in his fancy dance regalia where the bustles and the war dance. The grass dance is the dance, though, that opens up our powwow. They pat the grass down and prepare the grounds and pray for all the people that are coming for the festivities. Now we come to a major issue facing Indian country, and the big issue right now is the murdered and missing Indigenous women. Unfortunately, when you have reservation properties, sometimes there can be leases to different businesses or organizations, and the law becomes a very gray area. And what we're dealing with is the lack of protection, the lack of identification of resources to protect our Indigenous women. We have a very high rate of missing and murdered Indian women. We just, in my community, just experienced just a short week ago that we lost one of our young mothers was murdered by a non-Native person. And this is the struggle with this murdered and missing Indigenous women. It has that struggle of nobody cares. So this is an area where we really need to focus some attention and make sure that people understand that when a Native person is injured or harmed on the reservation, there are lack of protections, lack of prosecution of the non-Native person who has committed a crime against a Native person. And so it comes to jurisdictional issues. So this is a very big issue in Indian country now, dealing with our murdered and missing Indigenous women. This is a picture of myself and my Aunt Julie, my grandma, and my cousin Jenna. This is my daughter Sarah and Skylar, and another picture of Sarah and Skylar here in their regalia. Now this regalia that they're wearing, all of this I made. And it's about a year's worth of work, 40-hour weeks, all the beadwork, all of their dresses. I made all of that. It was part of a great opportunity for me to teach my girls how to bead. And someday I'm hoping they'll bead me a full regalia too. And this is my grandmother in her hide dress, and the beadwork, family and extended family, we all pitched in and helped make grandma so beautiful in her regalia. Now, ongoing issues in Indian country, and remember, Indian country is everywhere where Native people live, indigenous people live here. And so ongoing issues in Indian country today are clean water to drink, clean land to live on, and clean air to breathe. These are fundamental rights in our religion that all things God made deserve clean air, clean water, and clean land. If we destroy our environment and we don't keep clean land, clean water, clean air, then we ourselves are not going to be here. It's so important. Our environment is key to our heritage, key to our culture. Our environment is what provides sustenance for us, and we depend on clean water, clean land, clean air, and all of the fish, the wildlife, the plants, everything depends on those three things being clean. This is a picture of my dad and his youngest granddaughter, Isla. Now we go into some more positive things that my family is still doing, and we've done for generations. Sugar bush season. You know, we make maple syrup, and my brother Adam, he is we call him chief of the sugar bush, because he's the one who leads the family and conducts this annual event of the family coming together, and we do a cook of all of the syrup and all the sap, and as long as the sap's running, we're cooking. And so these are pictures of our sugar bush. And every year we add more and we develop more to it. So just some ongoing activities that our family still does. And we're still partaking in gathering, hunting, fishing, and growing our food. Here's a great picture of myself picking a morel mushroom. We go morel picking every season. And nope, I'm not sharing where we go picking the morels. But we also have hunting. This is the buck that my brother Adam just got this season. And we'll be probably eating that venison at spring ceremonies. And then we have myself. This is my big bass, a nice 21-inch bass. And I love fishing. We all love to fish, hunt. We love to gather and grow. And this is the largest pumpkin I've ever grown. Annually, I grow pumpkins and I disperse them amongst the family kids, all the nieces and nephews and my grandchildren. Everybody gets a pumpkin from our pumpkin patch. And so ongoing activities that we do, it's not just going to powwows and ceremonies. There is also the activities that our ancestors did. And that's something that we continue to do today and pass down to our future generations. Having the ability to grow your own food, hunt for your food, fish for your food, gather out of the natural environment. And this is here again why it's so important for us to have clean air, clean water, and clean land and protect our Mother Earth. This is a picture of my father standing in front of the Midday life pole in the longhouse, getting ready for ceremony. And he is very grateful and blessed. And these are my grown children. This is Calvin, this is Sarah, and this is my son-in-law CJ, my daughter Skylar. This is my grandson Charles, and this is my grandson Jordan. And he's a handful, as you see, for his mom all the time. And this is a picture of the actual wedding ceremony going on inside the longhouse. And at this time, my father is standing in the sacred place, blessing the marriage blanket. As I said, the marriage blanket's wrapped around the couple, and that acknowledges, it signifies to the community that they are now husband and wife. And this is my grandson Charles in his first regalia. We start our children very young, from the time they can walk, and even before, even when they're in the womb still, we have them at the powwow, we have them next to the drum, we sing to them the lullabies and all of those ceremonial songs to help encourage them to continue that traditional path. Now, this is a picture of myself when I was 3. This was done when I was 3 years old. I was able to go down to Kentucky and meet all of my kin, all of my relatives down there in Kentucky on my mom's side of the family. So at this time, I'd like to say me gwych for listening to my story about where I was born and raised. Holland, Michigan is a part of my roots and my beginning. And I continue today, I live my life teaching and continuing the traditions of my ancestors, raising our children to appreciate and honor the long history and heritage that makes us Anishinaabe people. So at this point in time, I do believe we've come to the conclusion of the PowerPoint. I really, it's not just the ending, but it's the beginning. And so we'll close this out and go to a question and answer period.
So we have a couple of things that are already in the chat. We had some questions that came in prior to the program. We asked people to send us any questions ahead of time. I know you looked at some of those. Elizabeth, do you want to take a look? And one of the questions was, has your family always lived in the Holland area? I think you explained that.
Yes, yep.
And if so, how did your family retain your land during colonization settlement? So I think you explained a lot about where you lived and what area of Michigan did your ancestors live, if it indeed was Michigan?
Yes, Southwest Michigan. Now, during Indian removal period, that was a time period where my great-great-grandfather, John, was forcibly removed when he was a small boy and sent to Kansas, left Kansas, came back here to the Allegan Forest, and was part of a Potawatomi group of people that hid in the forest for as long as they could. And he was the first generation to come out of hiding. And when he had my great-grandpa Bill, he started encouraging it at that point in time, encouraging all of his family to buy land, to put their stamp of this is my property and be property owners. And so it was, and going to education, you know, going to school and getting that education was very important. So it was my great-grandpa Bill that was the first of our family to move to Holland, Michigan and stay. I'm just looking at some of the chats here.
Yeah, go ahead.
And okay, so real quick before we end our time, I know I went over on my time, but I have a few things I did bring in. I just wanted to showcase some of our arts and crafts and some of the things that my family has made or some of our extended family. With our craft items, we do a lot of trade with each other still. We also purchase. We do have artistry that are of basket making to beadwork. Here I have this an example of a strawberry basket. This strawberry basket was made by Wasimo Pamp, and this is a son of Judy Pamp. She's a longtime friend, and I worked with her for many years at the Academy Montessori School on the reservation. But as you see, it looks like a strawberry. This is one of his first baskets that he made. And so I had to encourage the young man to keep up the good work. Strawberry baskets are very important in our culture. We utilize a strawberry basket when it comes to our funeral time. We tend to have a strawberry basket, bury it with the loved one, and inside we put some of the favorite things. We have favorite foods that we include in with their casket and other items of cultural importance. And we also have, I don't know how to do quill work very well, so that's why this is one of my prized possessions. This is a quill basket. If you can see, it's got two bunnies on it. This was a wedding present from my husband's, one of his community members. And inside, it's made out of birch bark, and then the quills are sewn to create the basket work. And nowadays, most baskets are signed. Yvonne Kubik. I do believe she is the one who made the basket. So this is quill work. This is Quill Basket. This is my newest piece, adding to my basket collection. This is made by Josh Hamzinga. He's a Sioux tribe member. And well, he might be Bay Mills, but I'm sorry, Josh. So as you see, it's a bonnet, but this is my newest piece, and it's all out of black ash, and it has the sweetgrass woven in through the top. And so this is, I haven't had a chance to wear it out in public yet, but if we have powwows again after the COVID stuff, I'll be able to wear this at the next powwow. This is a piece of beadwork show you a few quick pieces of beadwork. This was a medallion I made my husband. He is degreed in archaeology, anthropology, and he has done a lot of good work with the native graves protection and repatriation. And so this is a spear point, you see, and in here actually is beaded some of our ancient script. We had a written language. Even though some people don't think we did, we did. And so that's more information that's been passed down through many generations of my family, how to read and write in our language. So this was a piece I made him. And I had shown this before. This was pictured. This is a piece of beadwork that my brother made. And I said, peyote stitch is very hard. And if you see every bead, one bead at a time to create this. So it's very difficult stitch. So my brother Adam made that for me. Oh, excuse me, for my husband, but it matches a purse he made me, so I tend to wear it more often than my husband. And this is the first piece of beadwork my husband. My husband, Jeff, he wanted to learn to bead, so I taught him how to bead, and he's a huge Detroit fan, of course. Go Tigers. And so he wanted to do some beadwork and do something that he could actually wear casually and for fun. And he did a fantastic job for his first beadwork. So the Detroit D. Besides the seed beads, you know, in ancient times and prior to European contact, we had our seeds. If you notice, this is made out of apple seeds. This necklace, I can untangle them. These are made out of apple seeds. And so, as you notice, you can weave them together and make very pretty patterns. And so our jewelry prior was made out of a lot of seeds and animal fur in the embroidery. This is another necklace showing the use of different nuts and how the cross sections can be put together to create the beads. And here again in the background here, I just have a few other pieces I brought. This is my newest beadwork my husband bought me. A good friend of mine, Sarah Moore, made this. And like I said, I know how to bead. But whenever I can do a great trade or have the opportunity to purchase items from extended family and encourage them and their skill. So when we have powwows again, this will be something that I'll be wearing as part of my regalia. And that's applique. That stitch is applique. And that's here again, we could talk a whole Zoom meeting just on our different cultural craft work and artistry. At this time, I think that I've shared as much as I have brought. If there's any other questions.
Elizabeth.
Hello.
Hi, my name is Catherine Ristel, and I very much enjoyed your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
And I joined a couple minutes late, so if you did cover this, tell me, and I apologize. But I would like to understand. So I'm thinking, and please correct me, obviously, because I want to know if I'm wrong, that Anishinabe is like the overarching umbrella, and then there's different tribes under Anishinabe. And is Potawatomi have its own language separate from Ojibwe?
Yes.
Okay, and if you have any more of those interplay, I'd like to understand. I guess I had understood incorrectly. I think that Ojibwe was the name given to some tribes by other tribes as opposed to, I don't know, anything you can, but in Potawatomi, does Tawa, I think means lake. So does Potawatomi mean something in English to us?
Yes, Potawatomi is the keepers of fire.
Okay.
And Ojibwe, that refers more to our Puckertoe moccasin. And the Ottawa, also Odawa, they have each let me back up here. So you have Potawatomi, and they have Bodwe Wadmi Moen. Okay, that's their traditional language. And you have Anishinabe Moen, that is a dialect of Ojibwe. And then we have our dialect in Odawa country that is more specific to their culture, to their nation. Now, the base of the language is an Algonquian language that there's core words. There's core words that are related. And so what I've experienced is you could be Potawatomi in Ojibwe country and everyone's speaking the language and you still will understand what they're saying. There's just small variations of words. And in contemporary times too, with our language revitalization, which is a huge ongoing task for all of our nations, that language revitalization is really helping teach and rekindle that knowledge into our different families and different communities, so that here again, we don't forget. The boarding school era did do a big number on our ancestors, on our grandparents. They were forced to speak English. They were not allowed to speak their language. And coming away from the boarding school, they were afraid to let their children or their grandchildren speak the language because they were used to being hit, basically. In boarding school, they were punished for speaking their any of the Anishinaabe languages. And Anishinaabe is something that we call ourselves. I mean, loosely translated means human being. Some people, there's variations. Some people want to say that it's first man, or you could actually break the word down. And if I was a fluent speaker, I would break the word down. But here again, that could be a whole nother Zoom meeting, because the language, it is such a key and huge part of our culture and our religion. To try to sum it up very quickly would be very difficult, because each sound represents, it can be translated to a word. So when we say Anishinabe or Kajua Kimuan, that's Kaju Kimuan, that's my spirit name. And that means warm rain. Now, here again, there's Wabamini, Wa, white, Ba, Mimi. Okay, so you got white pigeon, Mimi, pigeon. So I stress the importance of language revitalization, and how even for myself, even though I was raised in the Anishinaabe culture and the heritage with our history and a lot of different aspects, it still was something, because I had grandparents, great-grandparents that were boarding schools and that were forced not to speak their ancient language. Some of those words, some of those things were lost for a small period of time. Like my Aunt Julie now, she is certified to teach the language, Anishinaabemowin, through Bay Mills College. And she has worked in various communities, and she participates in the language immersion, where we can have the opportunity. We have different communities, like in Wakamakong, we can go and do immersion where we're there, and in that community they all speak Anishinaabemowin. So you are submerged in the language, and you learn it a lot faster in that way. Thank you. That was a good question.
So thank you so much, Elizabeth. This was so informative, so engaging. And you're right, there could be so many more programs that we can pull out of this. So I'd love to talk to you about perhaps coming back again and doing another program for us. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Thank you everyone for participating.
Hi, Michelle.
This has been recorded. And if you are interested, or if there's somebody who missed it who would like to see it, all you need to do is go to the Holland Museum YouTube channel. sometime late tomorrow afternoon, it should be up there. And it may actually come to our website at some point, but if you want to look at it sooner, please go to the YouTube channel and check it out along with some of our other programs that have been recorded. Thank you again, Elizabeth. This has been delightful. And
Thank you. I'm honored.
everyone have a great evening and hope to see you again soon.
Kamapi. That's how we say goodbye. See you later.